So welcome to Behind the Theme. This is a show whereby I choose a game and I choose something from the game, be it artwork, mechanic, whatever. And I talk about the theme behind it and how the mechanic itself lends itself to the theme of the game and immerses you in the story. Now today's game would be Commands and Colors Ancients, one of my favorite games of all time, and the rule I choose to talk about, which I feel bring the Ancients themes to life, is the Cohesion rule. Or, well, in the game itself, it's called the Bolster Morale rule, which I feel just Cohesion is a simpler way to put it. Cohesion basically defined as a action or fact of forming a united whole. This is represented in the game, whereby if you have a hex that your unit is supported by two adjacent hexes with friendly units minus elephants, alright, then the unit can ignore a flag result which causes it to retreat. And of course there is another rule that is very important for Ancients, which is the leaders, but I kind of lump that into the Cohesion idea because to me, and I did a history degree and a philosophy degree in university, from what I always felt from a personal standpoint, that leaders were important in ancient warfare. It was much more before the battle in my view, and after the battle started, the leader had to go with the flow and could only really affect things in a more smaller manner. Now the theme behind the Bolster Morale rule is really interesting. Now if you watch War and Civilization, I love that whole idea that John Keegan talks about, where we created this intangible idea of glory, honor, and loyalty to make people do ridiculous things that goes against every survival instinct that we have as individuals. And it kind of starts in the 8th century when Homer talks about the Iliad and the Trojan War, where the famous story, of course, is when given a choice between mediocrity and a long life and a short life and glorious one, Achilles chose the second, and that even affected, of course, Alexander the Great and so on. Which is a very hard way to live if you think about it philosophically, because the whole idea of your life is not based on how you view yourself. It's literally based on how anybody else around you looks at you, because you can't be glorious without other people saying you're glorious. So your entire life is based on what other people think about you. You're basically living through your peers, because you're depending on all these other people, how they view on you. That can be a very strong bond suddenly, because you want them to like you, and if they do like you, then you form this bond. You care about the safety and everything else, and this forms, of course, that leads from the glory and honor part to the whole loyalty aspect of it. And I think this is truly encapsulated in a real life experience of a TED Talk which I watched, which I think is excellent. I'll put a link below to it, by Sebastian Jungler. And he's a journalist who actually stayed with a unit in Afghanistan, I believe. And he talks about why is it that veterans miss war, which is a strange idea, but again, fantastic talk. Go watch it. And it really brings down the whole idea of that whole honor and loyalty thing, of why people in units don't run away. And this fits back into the game. Alright, now the obvious one, of course, is also supposed to represent is that when a unit in ancient warfare sees its flanks protected, it's more sure of its position, that basically as individuals they won't be killed, and therefore they stand firm. But on top of that, like I said, there's also a sense that when you see more people around you, you put three criminals together and you ask them to confess, they won't, because no one wants to be a snitch. But the minute one person breaks, or either example, if you separate them, then they are much more likely, much higher percentage of them snitching. Alright, why? Because they don't want to embarrass themselves in front of their peers, and the more peers you put in front of them, the more pressure there is. On top of that, they care for the people beside them. That's always another factor. And so this leads into the whole honor and glory thing. And trust me, when you play the game and you see a unit run away, if you know the history behind the example, which units came from which era, you can make jokes about how when they go back, they'll be ostracized and stuff like that. And to even add on more to the theme on it, and the history behind the game, if you think about the tactics and strategies that came about with this kind of warfare, is really anti-intuitive from a individual perspective. Because if you take the hoplite, for example, the ancient Greek warrior, as an individual fighter, he was not very effective. Alright, his shield only protected his left side and the person to his left, meaning that that strategy literally is to put everybody in a block. You know, you have to work as a team, which again, very anti-intuitive. And to encapsulate this idea, I would say the best example is the idea from the Battle of Culloden, where Duke of Cumberland trained his men, and this is amazing, in 6 weeks to do something which to me still blows my mind. To give a very quick example, the Highland Charge was famous for a reason, because it works. Alright, and so the Highland Warrior basically had a shield, a smaller shield than the hoplite, of course, and a sword. Alright, and they would charge, and once they get in close with the Red Coat soldiers, they would basically slaughter them, because the musket with a bayonet is not a good close combat weapon. And the Red Coats kept losing and losing. And so the Duke of Cumberland taught them a strategy, which, again, from an individual perspective, seems like suicide. And I agree with one historian when he said it's a one-trick pony, because if it doesn't work, you know, the whole plan fails. And it literally depended on the person, like the phalanx, on the person beside you. Because when the basic strategy of the Highland Charge is, when the Highlander comes in, he uses his shield to knock away whatever is blocking his way, be it a spear, a pike, or a musket, and cut this way. Now, as you can see the motion when he does this entire side is open. And what the Duke of Cumberland taught his men was not to block the attack coming in front of you, but to stab the person to your right. Meaning that I'm training you that if a sword comes on here, don't bother about it. This guy will handle it. You are supposed to attack that. On top of that, to make it even more harder, is the fact that these Scots don't come in a nice timeline whereby, you know, like a joke where you just wait, soup, and all of them die. They come in piecemeal. So the timing is totally off. And in 6 weeks, they trained it, they did it, and it worked. Again, amazing. But this truly encapsulates the idea for me, like the ancients' warfare system where you trust in your fellow man, and how units together train well. Alright, the whole theme, why they ignore their flag symbol, totally makes sense. And if you play the game and you want to play it thematically, it totally can picture in your head how the men are protecting each other, how those two heavy infantry units you have on the board just take hit after hit, and they just keep standing no matter what. You know, you picture in your head. It's so wonderful. The next point is leaders. Now, like I said, I feel leaders are much more important in the strategic piece, but once the battle starts, they're much more tactical, they're much more limited. And how they work in the command and colors system is they help you to, again, ignore another flag, and they add their leadership roles. Alright, and again, this is to me how I feel that thematically it really shows that the leaders are much more, you know, tactical. Once the battle starts, they're much more limited in their scope. They can't affect the whole battlefield anymore due to limited communications and all. And another ability which people tend to forget sometimes is that a leader in a unit allows a unit, even if it's not allowed to usually, to advance and attack again. Alright, now this is all represented by several factors. Thematically, I think one of the best way to represent it, if you watch the new Mad Max movie, which is fantastic, Fury Road, it's a fantastic movie, please support that movie. It's the whole idea like Immortal Joe, this person who the people think he's a god, and how the war boys, these soldiers in his army, you know, worship him with the, you know, holy V8, you know, like witness me, and they would die for him by wanting him to witness them so they can go to Valhalla, or rather their version of Valhalla. It's the same thing when you have a leader, alright, with a unit, people just fight harder. Why? From a very selfish standpoint, it's the same thing. Like I talked about the witness me, there's a tangible profit to it. If you can be the lowest soldier, but if you manage to catch the leader's attention, he can rise you up with fantastic rewards. Hideyoshi from Japanese history used to be nothing more than a small peasant. It was a peasant, and he was risen to the highest form at the end of his life, into regent, because Nobunaga, the current lord, most powerful lord at the time, saw that he was very talented. So there is a practical reason to fight harder when the leader is with you. I think it links to the theme of the game, where, you know, even units that are usually like heavy infantry, they're not allowed to fight after they advance. They're allowed to with a leader unit with you connected with them, is thematically tied in, because a leader is there, like I say, he affects things tactically. I mean, he can order, alright, a unit to keep moving and fighting because he has ultimate authority. You tend to hesitate. The best of this is, I always felt that like Grouchy, Marshal Grouchy from Napoleon's army, always got a bad rap for not marching towards the cannon fire. Alright, and you can always imagine if Napoleon was with Grouchy's unit, he had ultimate authority, he could have steered everything through with no consequences or hesitation, because who's going to punish him? So a unit with a leader with a unit always gives it much more flexibility and a more decisive, how you say, active role, and it affects the battle much more quickly, because they don't need to stop and think that, should I go forward, should I do this, should I do that, what if I do this and get punished, and so on. And quick point, quick story, I actually met a descendant of Grouchy in Australia when I went there to study, and he told me how you know his name was Grouchy, and I talked about, oh, you know, Marshal Grouchy, and he said like, yes, actually that's my ancestor. So I don't know, think about it, from France, his descendants all the way in Australia. So, and on top of that, why units fight better, like to me thematically, when you ignore flags even, is, you know, people, like I said, the whole witness me idea, where not only do people feel like they need to show that they're braver, on top of that, usually the leader is best protected. Why? Because you know that the leader is there, meaning he more than likely will not put himself in a suicide run. Alright, so you're sure that at least that if anything was to happen, it usually should be good if everything went according to the leader's plan, which is what you're depending on in the whole battle anyway. That is behind the theme. Please do enjoy playing Commands and Colors Ancients. It's a wonderful game, and for the most part, if you like thematic war games that don't take too long and don't have a ton of rules, I think it's a good one to start with. Thank you very much. Till next word.